in. Oh,
Can you?
yay!
It is a miracle. This.
Can everyone hear me?
So
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I've said that like 100 times. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, I'm hearing an echo on somebody's end. Okay. Okay, so I just have to say to everybody who is watching this right now, you are witnessing an Association Chat Day miracle. This is, we honestly, until just exactly right now, you're seeing it live, could not get everybody on at the same time. So aren't we lucky? We're already winning. I know, Kevin, God bless us, every one of us. Yes. We are here today, and I'm so glad that you guys could make it. You know, this is the challenge when you're doing live video, that you just don't know what's going to happen today, but for many reasons, not the least of which that we all. But I want to welcome all of you to Association Chat. This is your weekly online discussion for the association community, where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with topics of the day, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I'm the host of Association Chat, KiKi L'Italien, and today is a great day for chat regulars, because today we had back-to-back Association Chat interviews. The second interview is happening right now. So there's a member engagement channel that too many associations aren't leveraging. In fact, this channel, it's true, is more often referred to as baggage. There are a number of associations who have turned this baggage into an asset. And what is the baggage we're referring to? Peggy, can you share?
Yes, those ridiculous chapters that just take so much time and effort and energy.
So yes, so we're talking about chapters. If you have components, chapters, interest groups, affiliates, sections, any other name that you want to give them, the potential is enormous. We're talking about member engagement, awareness, sales, and growth. We're going to talk about a few stories. We're going to talk about some research. We are going to talk about some amazing information today. So you are very lucky that you're a part of this today. Our guests today are going to help answer these questions. We have Charlotte Mylart from Bill Highway.
Hi, everybody.
Yes, we have Peggy Hoffman from Mariner Management.
Hi.
And we have Dresden. And how do I pronounce your last name, Dresden? Ferrand. You were right, Charlotte. We were talking about it, but I didn't get a chance to actually talk and hear from you before this. Okay, so Ferrand, I should know this. But Dresden Ferrand, she is the VP of Chapter Development from the Independent Electrical Contractors. So yes, welcome everyone. All right, so let's talk about this. You know, chapters, and I don't know if you guys know this about me, but when I started out in associations, I got my start working with chapters. That's it. So it's near and dear to my heart. And so for a lot of organizations, they really do consider chapters to be sort of a thorn in their side. Anytime you come up with a discussion that has to do with compliance around branding, or what are the chapters bringing back to us? You know, what's the ROI for our chapter engagement? Or if you're talking about GDPR, even what are those crazy chapters doing with the data that they're bringing in? There are all kinds of these issues that crop up around chapters. And then on the other side of it, if you're a chapter management professional, then you find out that each chapter has its own set of leaders, its own personality, its own individual set of issues. And so this is going to be a very interesting discussion, because the people we have on today, everybody, they are all experts in this area and focus in different ways to engage and make the most out of this very difficult, complicated, but also inspiring and great opportunity that is presented in the form of chapters. All right. So with all of that, that was a big preface, big deep breath after that. So often there's a strong relationship between national and chapters. And this can provide a lot of support in both directions, where national can provide support to the chapters and chapters can provide a lot of support to national. But what does that support look like? What's in it for national? So I want to start with you, Charlotte. Let's talk a little bit about the conceptual side of this chapter engagement. What's in it for national?
Yeah, for sure. So a little bit of a contentious relationship between national and their chapters. And like you mentioned before, KiKi, there's always that question of ROI. What are the chapters giving us back if we're providing support and we're putting, dollars into them, or maybe it's resources. I think the big thing that we're seeing is really that data component. These chapters or components are really extensions of your organization that are out and about, whether they're geographic, whether they're based by interest. They're interacting with members or potential members that are valuable to the entire organization. So when you think about all these interactions that are happening, they're creating data points. And a lot of times that information is being housed in silos. Each chapter has their systems or tools that they're using. And a lot of that isn't being sent up to that national or international organization, and that information also isn't being sent back down. So in a lot of cases, if you look at organizations that have joint membership scenarios, they might have members that are members of both the national and the chapter organizations, and they don't know what the member's doing at each level or each tier if they're not sharing that data back and forth. For those that have individual members, or individual in the sense that they could belong to national or the chapter, that's a potential member for the party that they don't belong to. So there's a lot of information there from a member acquisition standpoint, from a member retention standpoint. What are the members doing? What's trending? And that you do with that once you start getting that data. But today the challenge seems to be that there's still a gap between getting that data and housing it and sharing it. So you're starting to see organizations like Higher Logic build out their chapter module. Here at Bill Highway, we see scenarios day in and day out where organizations just don't have that connection, and the chapter management professional, or the CRP, is really acting as that compliance officer versus a strategic role within their organization to say, what can we do to make our chapters more impactful? How can we make this a win-win for the organization versus chasing down reporting that they might need on an annual or monthly basis?
Well, one of the things that, I mentioned it before, but it is that there is such an incredible opportunity that exists with chapters, or whatever you choose to call them, being able to provide this face-to-face representation of the brand that is your organization, right? Your association. But so often we see that that's just not fully recognized, appreciated, or optimized in the way that it can be. Peggy, we've worked together on chapter count, component relations, section council, and all kinds of stuff over the years. And I know that you've worked with a lot of different types of associations that have chapters, and that's been a real focus of yours in the past. What can you talk to me about, or talk to us about what's happening today, what's new in the world of association chapters, and what they're capable of doing?
So respond to that question, because what's really cool is we have seen a serious uptick in how organizations are beginning to evaluate, assess, basically look at this whole conversation around chapters, around these geographic components. One of the most interesting thing is, so by the ASAE policy and procedures, the benchmarking, somewhere around a little more than half of associations report having some kind of components. I believe that to be underreported, because oftentimes if you've got a sister organization that shares your space and shares your member minds, you may not call that a component. When we did the chapter benchmarking study, volunteerism, but what's really neat in the benchmarking study and the examination study, upwards of 40 to 50% of the organization saying that they are taking a look at and beginning to address changes, modifications in their chapter structure. In fact, 43% said of that very large associate, they were percent that they'd actually changed something. So what we're seeing is when we start asking why, the components, the component benchmarking study that we did, nearly everyone in this study said they are looking at the value of chapters that are engaged, right? But followed by leadership development, member recruitment, and communications marketing channel. But at the same time, they're saying that there is a disconnect or a gap between what they have, what they want, and what they're getting. And only 13%, there's a lot of talking, only 13% said that they were getting all high marks from their chapters. So bottom line, people are saying, we see value. We really haven't figured out the ROI yet, but we see the value and we believe that with changes or tweaks or whatever, we can make a difference. Let me just step back and just say one thing. I mean, I don't know if you've talked about the ASAE Foresight Works research, but ASAE completed that. It's 41 drivers that are having wow impact, right, on associations. When you look at them, I just love there's two or three of them related to learning, next gen learning, one related to next gen mentoring, and one talking about the 21st century guilds. You put those three things together, and what we're talking about is that of the 41 drivers, that's about 5 of them, right? Mm-hmm. Which are a call to action for our component structures, shift them to engage for the sustainability of our associations. So we're in an exciting time. And what I love is that you've got all of these people saying, let's change something or try something or do something. And then you have folks like Dresden who can tell the story of, without much change, we've just figured out how to optimize the current structure.
Yeah, so
I'd say no, it's not baggage.
And I have to comment. I have to say, Kevin, I see over there in the chat, he's like, this is a great document, talking about the Foresight Works, great document and free to all of us. I totally plagiarized it for a client. He is so funny, you guys. If you're not following Kevin, you should know. But anyway, it's just an amazing document. I will link to it in the show notes, and you'll be able to see it on associationchat.com after. Any of the resources mentioned here, I try to link to those in the show notes afterwards. I also want to bring to your attention that we have polls. If you're on the Crowdcast platform, please fill out the polls that are there. If you're on Facebook Live, and I see you over there, Vivian and Moira and Deborah and Kevin and Jenna and so many different people. Hi, guys. If you have questions, I'm going to try to keep my eye over there too, so that I can make sure to bring those in and ask our guests your questions as well. The 3 poll questions for everybody who's watching and listening: what type of component structure do you have? And there's a number of different options for you. Chapters are subsidiaries of the central organization. Chapters are separate organizations chartered by the central organization. Chapters are separate organizations affiliated, a federation, other, or none. And what issues or concerns do you have with your current component system? Alignment, risk management, quality control, resource allocation, or other? And then finally, what do your components bring to the association? As professional development, product development, marketing communication channel. This is for association, member recruitment, member engagement, leadership development, advocacy, distribution channel for your association? Other, all of the above, or some of the above? Isn't that great? We give you so many options. Yes, and hey, Russ, I see. Yes, I thank you for listening to the earlier recording. I was giving some love to Russ, our friend who just joined us in the chat box. This is the joy of having a live streamed show like this every week. So, okay, so we are talking about chapters, the opportunity that you have, the challenges that you are facing. And I believe that Dresden was brought up as somebody who had a wonderful experience with making some significant changes in her own organization. And so, Dresden, could you maybe share with us a little bit about what's going on at your organization and what your experience has been with the chapters there?
Sure. From a conceptual point of view, I do think that we have our chapters sort of becoming this challenger baggage and finding out ways that we can align ourselves and really truly work together to serve a larger mission. One of the examples that I have from a previous place of employment was at COSEN. COSEN is a professional society association in education. And one of the things that I did is I created a chapter advisory group, and this was for a chapter be a part of a very special group in which they had direct communication and alignment and opportunity to express what their needs and wants are to the board of directors of the board, and as well as be a part of the Nationals Office way of strategic planning. So allowing them into that space as a part of having their concerns heard, having that partnership, I think was really great for transparency. Also, if there in terms of other chapters not following the policies, charter agreement, or any type of disciplinary actions or these kinds of things that had to that may occur, the chapter advisory group was responsible to talking to that particular chapter. So it became peer-to-peer, which sort of then took the element of me, of sort of that national standpoint, having to step in and have that oftentimes can be a difficult conversation. So the chapter advisory group, I think, was huge for us as a way to continue organization and that we're all moving in the same direction.
So, I want to talk a little bit more about the chapter advisory group concept, because this is something that when you rattle it off, and you say chapter advisory group, I think that easier said than done. This is something that I've heard a lot of people talk about in the component relations arena, but it can be a challenge to actually pull it off. And so what is part of what made that successful? I mean, what are maybe some tips that from your own experience that were, where you could sort of guide people to maybe have greater success when they try to do something like this?
Sure. I think first and foremost, when you think about putting a chapter advisory group together, you have to be particular in who you can invite on, but also making sure that you make it, the optics looks like it's process, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. But you do want to have those champions. You also want to have those influencers. But I also think it's important to have those one or two people that maybe sometimes do talk a lot, but they're often ask the questions that everybody else won't ask but wants to know the answer to. So I think you need a good group of all of those personalities. I think that you need people definitely who are on the same board of and that doesn't necessarily have that contentious relationship of nationals overstepping here and that kind of natural tension that lies in a component type structure. So you definitely want to have someone that maybe understands that tension, but definitely doesn't feel that way, because the whole point of creating the advisory group is to lessen that tension and be able to work together. So that's just one tip, is make sure that you be smart about who you pick. Number two, they need to meet regularly to review what's happening on each chapter, review the data chapter, and understand what is happening within the network, and where can the advisory group step in to have a chapter that's maybe struggling with the growth goal, or to help a chapter that seeing some retention issues, or maybe some staffing issues. So again, the chapter put in place so information is coming to that group, and then they're relaying that information to me and asking me to. It's not me taking over and saying, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z for your chapter. I'm gonna come down, and this is a collective group of your peers saying these are some areas that we see that you, and these are some ways that other peers in the network are going to help you, or also Dresden and maybe her staff are going to help you. Mm-hmm. I think having a really good structure to the advisory group in terms of what data are they getting from each chapter, how often do they regularly meet, and then what are the goals of that advisory group. I think another key thing is you have to get your board of directors involved. I felt coming in and a couple different associations I worked at, and now a lot of times our state chapter leaders don't have access to our board of directors, especially in a federated model where dues are coming from the ground up. And our chapters are like, well, we always pay national dues, but we don't necessarily have a say in the Vision 2025 that just came out from the National Board of Directors. And they don't feel a part of it. And those sort of tensions arise. So that advisory committee has now, we created a process in which now they have an open ear or an opportunity to get with board of directors and speak from the chapter level. These are some of the things that we want national to focus on. These are some of the initiatives that are happening in my state, and how can we collaborate with you as taking it, as a chapter network, collaborating with the network, collaborating with IEC National, not just chapter to IEC National, but as a chapter network to IEC National. So it's really creating that alignment and that open door communication and a very good level of transparency.
I love that you're sharing this example because, I know so many people who they struggle and struggle and struggle. And actually, Russ mentions over here in the chat, he says, at my last gig, some of the chapters were totally rogue, designing their own logos, etc., and didn't care what the national office said. And, I feel like when I look back at the different associations where I worked, I think there were always, I ran into that with some chapters that were rogue, or more independent. And maybe there was this sort of animosity between them and sometimes the national or headquarters. One of the things that I saw, and by the way, guys, I have to say thank you to the people watching on Facebook, because I see you waving over there, Maria, and some of you who have joined on. And I'm watching, so if you have any questions, make sure to ask. But I think that while there are these struggles, hearing the stories about success remind us that it's something that can be accomplished, something that we can overcome. And part of these great talking points that you guys provided me with different aspects of this discussion that you could speak to. One of the things under Charlotte's heading, you guys had to do with, talking about trying a pilot and having a subset of chapters that test out an idea or a solution. So I can imagine that are struggling with what can we do to make this work, that maybe that's something that they can try. Charlotte, could you maybe speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So in a pilot scenario, just to kind of piggyback off of Dresden, it really helps build not necessarily an advisory group, but a group of peers that can speak to how something works or the advantage that it's providing. So when you're really looking to get a large number of chapters or components, an initiative, whatever it is, if you can pilot and show how it works within a couple of influential key chapters or components, it can really transcend across the organization through that peer-to-peer network. Mm-hmm. One of the things we always recommend when you're doing a pilot is to make sure that your pilot is representative of your chapter population in terms of size, whether it be dollars or member counts, in terms of how they operate. If their structures are a little different, you want it to be geographically diverse. You want to make sure that you feel like you're representing the entire population of the organization so that nobody feels left out or can point to that one scenario where they're like, well, I don't see me in that. Like, Allison House is going to work for me because I don't operate that way. Mm-hmm. You really want to make sure you're all inclusive and kind of get everybody in there. But yeah, a pilot's a great way to go. And it's kind of another play on that advisory board where you really get that peer-to-peer interaction.
So and there's another, I'm sorry, if I can just jump in, there's another version of the pilot, which I think is pretty cool in that you don't try to pilot it out to the world, a solution. Instead, you find a chapter that's done something pretty interesting or innovative, and you say, okay, let's work on it down here. So let this chapter be the R&D to solve something, and then bring it up through the system. We just did a webinar with Bill Highway where we talked about, we called it the trickle up, and we gave a couple of examples, 3 examples actually, of associations who had sought to do this. But I've seen associations do that for structure change, for adapting to programs, lots of ways where you get a chapter that says, this is an interesting thing. We've come up with a solution. Now we're going to pilot it, which is one way of doing it. This is just another way, is saying, okay, you want to try that out. So there's an organization right now which is trying out a new centralized admin system with one state. So that's all they're doing. They're just saying, can we make this work over here? And they didn't pick the toughest state, and they didn't pick the easiest state. They didn't pick the most complex state. It doesn't solve all of the problems. But when the chapters come around and they're working the solution, then that message comes.
Right.
Sorry, many of us in the national organization, we have blinders on and we don't really know what it's like to be down in the trenches. I mean, if I could say to you, we manage 3 chapter-based organizations, and there are some days that I wish the national office would just call me up before they launch stuff. And I'd say, I understand the national perspective, but I'm living down here. So that's why that plan B kind of pilot can also be useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that is such a key thing. I say people is such a generalization, but it is a generalization for a reason. There are so many people who I think they fail to recognize that these are your pockets of people completely engaged. Like, even if you have a chapter where it's a loose engagement, right? And it could be better there. Those people are affiliated with that topic, that industry, whatever it is in that geographic location or around the topic that they care about. There is value in that. And so if you're not able to sort of recognize how you can use that information and work with them to craft better products and services and benefits for them, or even progress for the industry that you're in, then you're missing out on a great opportunity. People spend a lot of money to put together focus groups, and a lot of times you would find exactly who you need in these chapters. So when you say R&D, it's like it totally rings true. I'm going to bring up the polls that we mentioned earlier for everybody who's watching right now. Hey, Lowell, I see you. He says, Lowell Applebaum says, such rock star speakers on the chat today. Oh, lots of love to all of you guys from Lowell. Yay.
We love you too, Lowell. Anyway.
Yeah, Lowell, where are you? Well, he's on Facebook Live. It's great. Let me bring up the poll so everybody can see what the result was from that. All right. What type of component structure do you have? We have a lot of people with chapters or separate organizations affiliated, or chapters are subsidiaries of the central organization, and a couple with a federation. Alignment for what issues or concerns do you have with your current component system? Alignment came out on top at 80% with resource allocation underneath that. And then what do your components bring to the association? And there's 1 vote for all of the above and 8 votes for some of the above, this very lengthy list. So obviously there's a lot of pros to having components. There's a lot of pros to having them be a part of it. And yet it can be a challenge. So Are you surprised by any of the outcomes of the poll results, you guys? Not really.
No. In fact, when we looked at the benchmarking studies, so we asked folks, you know, in terms of where they found their chapters, where there were problems. Alignment was picked number one by 35%, followed by quality. That's quality of the work that they're doing, the programming that they're doing at 29%. And then resource allocation and risk management were lower. But absolutely, alignment is a critical issue. And when you think about it, we all have a share of our members' minds. So not having good alignment can just be a real risk factor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that happens a lot where when I saw alignment, I immediately wanted to go, well, what kind of alignment? Is alignment with the mission? Is alignment with, your yearly goals? What is it that you're, and, but I think it's fair to say that a lot of times, at least when I saw that from my own experience, when chapters sometimes had different goals and different ideas on what needed to happen. Oh, there's love. There's like love happening on the screen right now. It's amazing. I wish people came and hugged me. I work from home and people don't do that, Like this is where people should love me, and I don't have people.
This is the real side of associations you see.
Yeah. I mean, where's mine? Oh, okay. So anyway, are you guys hiring, Dresden? Just tell me. It's interesting though, because that alignment question, that alignment problem, really does come into play. I want to find out, and maybe talk a little bit about that key thing we had mentioned before, which is you have these chapters that are, for a lot of times that are focused on the issues that are the most important to them in their area, right there, localized. And they are identifying those key things, those key issues for them. How would it impact your organization, Dresden, if you didn't have the chapters focused on those key areas?
Well, it would be a huge detriment to the electrical industry as a whole. So at Independent Electrical Contractors, our members are electrical contractor business owners. So these are people who are relying on IEC as a school, but also as a chapter to train the next generation of electricians. As we know, in the United States, we have a huge skill gap when it comes to the trades, but certainly for electricians and getting people into the field, getting people into the right apprenticeship programs. Oftentimes our electricians coming from all parts of life. College is not for everyone. Not everyone can afford it. So we look at our chapters to go locally and look at developing pre-apprenticeship programs in the schools. This could be as starting out even in junior high school to high school. So that's not something national could do. We could certainly want to try and create messaging around getting into school districts, but it's going to take our chapters locally to penetrate the local politics, the economies, and all those pieces that go into public school education. A big part about our chapters in terms of how they're serving our industry is they're also collecting information about business owner and leaders. What do they need? Continuing education. Electricians sometimes also need soft skill training. Different states are going to have different policies legislatively that are affecting wage and affecting equal opportunity for women and in the trade. So there's lots of different things like that are happening that really, national, we could take a backseat in terms of supporting what our chapters are doing, but our chapters are on the front line to collect that information and provide us analysis and really give us the information and put some resources behind them so they can move forward with their agenda. I would say one thing so that's from a trade association standpoint. In my other association, working at a professional society, our chapters really work to understand what are the legal issues in every state regarding privacy. And a big part of using education technology in a classroom is about laws around privacy, student data, how information is collected, how students are bringing their own device. We all know as people, as educators, or certainly working with associations where education is the primary industry, that technology is influencing K through 12 education. But IEC, COSA National out of Washington, D.C., we're not going to understand what specifically is happening in California or what's specifically happening in Maine in terms of those policies and those legal things that are happening on the ground. Those are something that our chapters have to understand, research, target, and therefore move that forward in order to get technology into the classroom. It's so critical because depending on what state you're on, technology plays a key role in making sure that education is equitable for everyone. If you have internet anytime, anywhere, a child is able to learn anytime, anywhere. And so that's a very critical mission of that professional society. Our chapters are critical in making sure that they're pushing that agenda. Another example would be making sure that internet is available all around in a community. So someone whose parent is a single mom and they work the local McDonald's or the laundromat and get online and continue to do their learning if they don't have internet in the house. That's going very deep within the community level that our chapters do to push the mission forward.
Wow. I mean, when I hear you say all of that, it makes it seem crazy that an organization would have these chapters or these components and not really be using them to the full effect. But there is this ROI question. And Peggy, I know that you and I and all of us have been asked the ROI question for so many things for so long. But what have you heard as it pertains to chapters over the years? What's changed? And, I imagine that this touches on what Charlotte does with Bill Highway too, on being able to prove that ROI. Could maybe both of you tackle this question of ROI and chapters? Like when you have to go and report back and say, okay, I just heard Dresden talk about the most amazing example, and the person pushes back and says, but what's the ROI? What do you say?
So first and foremost, I say that the ROI, if you're going to get down deep to what the ROI of having chapters is, it's a little bit like the let's measure member engagement. And you want to do member scoring. And so part of what you have to do is you have to say, what is engagement to us? Because that's what an association does when they're putting together an engagement score. And I'm going to say the ROI of the chapter is what's relevant to us. I will tell you that for most organizations, when they've asked that question, they've begun to dig into the answer, looking at this idea of understanding the how chapters are giving a different door for members to come into. And when you want to look at the whole organization and you look at all these different places, you have readers, you have consumers, through a chapter, right?
Yeah.
It's not community. So the ROI really is going to come around that engagement. And when you look at that in a broader sense, you begin to be able to track it. But what's really cool is you begin to look at some organizations that are tracking things like the channel for marketing comms. So, and I had one organization that told me that when they began to look at where their real sources were for memberships, for conferences, for purchases, they were finding that a lot were coming through the chapters. That's a channel. And then the other place that was really cool was one organization, this is a number of years ago, when they began to really look at where members were getting their education. I think it was like 60% of the education coming through the organization to their member cohort were actually coming from chapter hosted events. So in other words, they were on the professional development. When you looked at that, a lion's share of it was actually being produced or hosted or served up at the local level. So the ROI, if you're looking at your organization, you can look at a lot of different ways to be able to find that thread. The problem is it does take, just like creating that membership engagement score, it does create some effort. Once you create the effort, you can right size the resourcing of that. And that's the beautiful part. If you are under resourcing your chapter program, then you're not getting, you're throwing money away. If you're over sourcing it, then you're throwing money away. So it's getting to the right place. And I'll do one last plug because we're super excited that the Bill Highway July webinar is on figuring out the ROI, and Patrick from GPTA and Peter from Mariner are going to be talking about it. And then they're doing, so they're going to do the virtual, and then they're going to go do the session at annual.
Oh, so cool.
That's where this conversation has finally gotten to.
That is so awesome.
Yes. It's so yeah. Anyway, go Charlotte, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I was really just going to kind of take what Dresden had said full circle and saying it really comes back to that data piece. Like Peggy's saying, it's going to take some legwork, but if you can't even access that data and you can't even get that information, you don't even really have a great place to start. Yeah. So it really ties back into what kind of information are you getting? How are you tracking those touch points? How are you getting all that information in one spot? How are you sharing it? And it really all kind of ties together. So I think it all kind of comes full circle here when you talk about that ROI topic. And I think we're really excited to see what Patrick has to say and what Peter or what they're going to talk about on in July.
Oh, I love it. And go ahead, Dresden, please.
One of the ways that we measure ROI here at IEC, and in particular, I've been on now for about a year and 3 months. I brought in almost 3 chapters. One's popping up in Nashville as of 2 weeks ago. New one in 18 years.
Wow.
So really big strides that have been made. One of the things I've already seen is that piece that you said, Peggy, on events and meetings. Better at aligning meetings and events with chapter members. We're allowing them to be key curators of the content, and we've got a significant jump, especially these new chapters, new members of people who are coming to our national meetings who've never been a part of the party. So that's a number that has jumped up big time. A second thing that I've noticed, retention. Oftentimes our chapters are the forefront of learning about stories. And I think stories are so much more impactful than any mailing you could do or any phone call you could do. The stories that we get from our chapters about these young men and women succeeding are just absolutely outstanding. You've got folks who come from broken homes or who've grown up in foster care, who college was never even an option for them. Coming out of a 4-year apprenticeship program, making an average of $60,000 a year, which is a starting salary for an electrician, with no debt. And so these are success stories for young Americans that are often left behind. Yeah. And we actually our chapter and we take these stories. Yeah,
I mean, let me just put this into perspective for anybody who's listening to this right now. We have friends with Q Career who try to connect and they try to fill the skills gap between trade or associations and students who maybe have never heard of associations. But for anybody who thinks that something like a social media manager or something like that sounds like a really awesome job to have right out of school, let me just tell you that you're not looking at your typical salary being $60,000 to start right out of college if you're going into that. And yet what you're saying here is that, through this effort, when people are going out of school and they have worked with your chapters, they've worked on this training, they're going in and they're able to command this salary to start. Right. So I just want, I want people to just pause and think about this because I think a challenge to a lot of maybe misinformation that's out there, and to recognize that there are good jobs that are out there. They're just maybe not what you think they are.
Yes.
You know, you can make a good living still. It's just maybe not doing exactly what you thought you were going to do. So anyway, thank you, Dresden. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to pause there for a moment.
Yes.
So let's, I see that we have about 13 minutes left, and I don't want to waste that time. There have been, for those who are watching, Tom, Michael, all of you over on Robbie, another Michael, Amy, watching over on Facebook Live. Some incredible resources have been shared here on the Crowdcast channel. And so I am copying the links to those, and I'm going to add them to the show notes that I'm posting on associationchat.com after this show, so that everyone will have access to them, including this link to a Trickle Up Approach webinar that you can check out that's happening with Bill Highway that Peggy mentioned just a little bit ago. But so as we're wrapping things up, hey, Charlotte, you're back. Or maybe you're not. So I want you guys to think about probably for each one of you, the key lesson you or I guess learning from this that you want people to walk away with today. And I'm going to let you think about that. I'm going to read Kevin's post here. He said he did a compensation survey for Google and Digital Analysts Association. They make a buttload of money, especially for young people with less than 10 years or greater. Yeah, less than 10 years of experience. But digital, I mean, that's different than a starting salary for social media. I know because I hire those guys. So I can tell you, I'm not paying them that. So they can. I'm just not saying that they are. So anyway, a post on our chapter is worth it. Yep, I will share that. Yeah, that's true. Making half that much would make people very happy. That is true. Okay, guys. So I want to hear it. What do you think is your best piece of like lessons learning, future learning for people who are maybe they're component relations professionals, maybe they are CEOs and they're trying to figure out if components are the right thing for their organizations? What do you think are the key lessons to take away from our discussion today about chapters?
Okay, I'll go.
I know.
We're loyal to people and to causes, not to organizations. And so if chapters are built on the wrong model, we'll lose people. So there is a call, an imperative for us to make our chapters still relevant. And that means embracing technology. It means embracing the new generation of models and structures and engagement, and chapters will succeed.
Great. I would say, going back the tension piece, if you are in an association that is having issues or struggles with that natural tension that involves between component and a national office, for example, and it can exist in a professional society as well. I think the key, in going back to what Peggy said, is it's about relationships. Address those things head on. Be the big person in the room. Make the phone calls. Fly out and visit someone. Those face-to-face relationships go a long way. In the last couple of associations I've been in, has definitely been that friction and tension. Certainly a new employee going into a situation like that, where you are managing those programs, it's really important that you make that trust. The second part that I would say is truly understanding the strengths of your chapters requires, right? So that means you've got to put your boot on the ground, that your organization is resourcing your chapter development efforts are critical. You've got to have budget to visit those folks, sit at their meetings, go to those events, and spend real time with them. You can't be all trying to have a conversation. You need to come down here and partner. And that goes a big way.
That's an excellent point, and that actually makes me want to dig into that whole discussion about budget even deeper. Let me get to Charlotte though, and then maybe we can touch on the budget stuff if you guys don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. So to kind of dig into what I think Peggy and Dresden just said, to kind of reiterate it, I think if you're thinking about implementing chapters in your organization or looking to restructure or what have you, or just looking for a new way to rethink, it's really thinking about your chapter network as any other effective, impactful team. You need to be cohesive. You need to play to each other's strengths. Like, you are a team. So like Dresden said, know your chapter's strengths, know your chapter's weaknesses. Also know your organization's weaknesses and where the chapters might be really strong and how you can leverage that and utilize that. Have clearly defined objectives. What do you want the chapters to accomplish? What do you expect of them? And then how are you holding them accountable, and vice versa? I think all those elements of what you see in good teams in business and associations, wherever it is, I think those really carry over into the chapter networks and what set the parameters for what it needs to be successful.
I love that. I think it's so true. But what do you guys have to say about the budget question? I want to dig into that. I want to dig into that just because connected to the ROI question, which has to be super popular, one of the most popular when it comes to, how much focus should we put on it, is let's talk about the money. Let's talk about the money that goes into these chapter programs. So say I'm going to look at this in a positive way and say, you know what, you're right. We're probably not doing as much as we could be doing with our chapter program right now. I'm just using the word chapter in lieu of anything else, but you know what I'm saying? How do I know if I'm spending the right amount on my chapter program? What are the must-haves? What are the critical areas that I need to focus on? And I know this probably deserves its own special hour-long thing. But if I had to give you, say 5 minutes to each of you, share what you think immediately, top of mind, where would you point people? Where would you point this executive that is so prescient that they understand that they need to now go forward and do the thing with chapters?
Wow. That is I'm going to take, so I can, in my mind, it's blowing up right now. Where I've had zero budget, and I've been in another position where I've had a lot of budget. I think critical, again, making sure there's budget for the FaceTime traveling, right? So whatever that, maybe that's, for me, I look at it, if you've got, 50 chapters or something, take 10%, and then maybe add $500 to that. There's some different models that you can use to budget for chapter visits. I think that's critical for building relationships. I would say second, governance. If you, whatever model, you have, whether it's a volunteer run negotiation or whether you're, or your chapter is its own 501c3 or 501c6, you have to make sure that they are in, because there can be some legal issues that rise up there. So I think making sure that you are helping if they need some legal support or processing their 990 or just whatever those legality governance issues are, you want to make sure that you've got some funding to support them on that. Second is training. We have, and every chapter is going to be different. Again, if it's volunteers or if they have their own executive director and staff, are they getting the most training in terms of their own professional development, as well as training for their board? And oftentimes these volunteers, my executive directors started out as electrical contractors, are now executive directors of the chapter, and have sort of switched over. So you have to really assess where each of these leaders are in their own journey in terms of their own chapter management, and make sure that you are prepared to help fund them if necessary. So if that is you putting together a special regional program, when you find that there's a big need, providing that training, or whether that's a webinar host, or maybe it's bringing in a speaker, whatever that's going to look like, you need to make sure that you have training dollars for your chapter. So I'm going to stop there, but those are just sort of two off the I've had to address.
No, I love that. I think it's so, and that face-to-face we see over in the comments, Patrick saying nothing can replace face-to-face or in person. Travel budget is a must. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I could say, I mean, we don't have unlimited budgets, but the two places where I think it can make a tremendous difference is, one is an ongoing 24/7, 12 months of training and resource availability. So you're just providing just in time resources that help them get the job done better, faster, quicker. And some of that's going to be those quick little videos I can download. Some of that's going to be webinars. Some of that's going to be calls. Some of that's going to be face-to-face. It's going to be all kinds of things. But it's not a one-up. Many associations try to do this with a one-up and a lame chapter portal. That's not going to work. If you want them to be better, resource them. And if you teach someone to fish, they will eat. So I'm just saying that's the first place. And the second place is the technology. We can apply technology to simplify their process, data share, so that you can all make better decisions and allocate dollars more effectively. That's great. And I think we need to stop looking at technology like this is the technology we're buying for the chapters and the chapter budget is X. No, I mean, you'd only have to, and I know Bill Highways keeps a low profile on this stuff. You only have to talk with the talking about it. And what you're going to realize is it's not a chapter issue. It's an organizational issue. I'm addressing that I'm addressing that data, and I'm addressing that financial, good financial management. And all of a sudden it's great. So if you can only do two things, those are the two things I'd spend money on.
I like it.
Right. I really like what you just said there too. And I mean, I even think that this is a larger conversation. When we look at associations with component modules, I think we need to start addressing the technology gaps at both the chapter level and the national. Why should each of our chapters be, reduplicating efforts as far as, their own membership database or create their own chapter app or any of these things? We need to start engaging the power of the network and then looking at vendors and doing chapter buy-ins for a lot of the technologies that we need that can solve all of our and that's a larger conversation. And part of what I asked for my budget this year is I want a summit leaders together and we talk about what are those big technology gaps that we have, and then how do we put all of our resources into bulk purchasing. But again, that's a $30,000 event. So you have a budget to utilize your chapters, and you have to make sure that is written in and that you are getting that from or from your leaders at your organization.
And again, it's not a chapter thing, it's an organization.
It's an organization thing. Charlotte?
So we recently also did a webinar with Peggy and Peter on chapter leadership conferences, which is why I'm latching onto what you said there, Dresden. And that could not be a better investment. Like, that is such a great way to get everybody together, that face-to-face. So you have that relationship building. You also have the peer-to-peer network where people are networking and talking and sharing ideas and collaborating. And also that's a great place to really get that buy-in that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. If you want to get them bought into a piece of technology or an idea or some new program, that is the place to do it when they're all there in one room, able to give their input, ask their questions, and really talk amongst themselves, because someone's going to have a different issue with it than someone else does, or they're going to have a different reason for why they would want it than someone else. And getting that all together, a chapter or a leadership conference or a summit, whether it's one day, a couple days, whatever it is, that to me is a really good investment. Now, is it the top of the list? Depends what you got going on in your organization, but it is definitely a high priority that I think most organizations should be striving for to get into their budget.
I love this. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for staying a minute or two later than usual. Yeah. And thanks to everybody who watched, who tuned in on Crowdcast, who tuned in on Facebook Live, and even those who are on YouTube Live. I know there are a couple of you out there. And I just, thanks to my guests, Peggy, Charlotte, Dresden, You guys were full of knowledge and wisdom that I think is really going to make a difference for people who are paying attention and listening. So thanks to everyone. I hope you all learned something that was helpful and valuable for you about chapters today that will help you in the future. And I hope so much that you can tune in again. And until next time, everyone, keep asking questions to learn every day. As Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. All right. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
And we are done. Bye, guys. Bye.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.